Hey, welcome back, YouTubers, to the Evil Bad Book Club, where we're going to be reading chapter 22 of the Turner Diaries today. Stand by while I get my intelligence spectacles on. Wow, I seem way more intelligent now. July 19, 1994. For the past 5 days, I've been witnessing what surely must be one of the biggest mass migrations in history. The evacuation of the blacks and mestizos and boat people from Southern California. We've been marching them to the east at a rate of better than 1 million a day, and there still seems to be no end to them. I learned at our unit meeting this evening, however, that tomorrow is expected to be the last full day of evacuation. After that, it'll just be a matter of sending them across the lines in batches of a few thousand at a time. As we round up strays and finish separating some areas, which are still racially mixed, my men and I have had the responsibility of finding transportation for those unable to make the trek on foot. We started with flatbed trucks and large tractor trailer rigs able to haul a couple of hundred people at a time, and we ended up using every delivery van and panel truck we could find in or near the evacuated Black and Chicano neighborhoods. Nearly 6,000 trucks altogether. At first, we tried to do a careful job of making sure each truck had just enough fuel in its tank to make the one-way trip into enemy territory. But that took too long, and so we settled for trying to be reasonably sure that each vehicle had at least enough fuel for the trip. Late yesterday, we began running out of trucks, and so all day today we have been using passenger cars. I broke up the roughly 300 men under me into squads of 10. Each squad rounded up approximately 50 young black volunteers, with the promise of food, who claim they are experienced at jumping the ignition on cars. Then 4 squads began ferrying every parked car from Volkswagen to Cadillacs, which can be started and whose fuel gauge indicates at least a quarter of a tank of gasoline. Into the packed debarkation areas, there our black car thieves volunteers hustle a pregnant negress or an elderly cripple behind the wheel, pack the vehicle with as many pickaninnies and miscellaneous lame, sick, and halt non-whites as it can possibly carry, sometimes piling them on roofs and fenders and sending it on its way, then back for more cars. I have been surprised to see how callous our volunteer blacks are toward their own people. Some of the older blacks, who haven't been able to fend for themselves, are obviously near the point of death from starvation and dehydration, yet our volunteers handle them so roughly and pack them so tightly into the cars that it makes me flinch to watch them. When one overloaded Cadillac started onto the eastbound freeway with a lurch this morning, an ancient Negro lost his grip and fell off the roof, landing head first on the pavement and crushing his skull like an egg. The blacks who had just loaded the car roared with laughter. It was apparently the funniest thing they'd seen in a long time. Our logistics have been terrible. We've violated every security rule in the book and taken some extraordinary risks. There were hundreds of times when the blacks could have jumped us because we were spread so thin and often obliged to work deep within their jam-packed enclaves without backup personnel to rescue us in the event of trouble. I really don't have enough men to handle this job properly, and we've all been working at least 18 hours a day, often not stopping to rest until we're so tired we're stumbling. It's a good thing tomorrow is the last day, because I don't think my men can last much longer, or our luck either. What we've accomplished so far is really quite remarkable, though. We've moved out approximately 500,000 non whites who couldn't possibly have made it on foot. Each and every one of these is now the responsibility of the system to feed and house and clothe and keep out of trouble. Together with the 7 million or so able bodied blacks and Chicanos we're sending them, that's quite a responsibility. This whole evacuation amounts to a new form of warfare, demographic war. Not only are we getting the non-whites out of our area, but we're doing two additional things which should pay off for us later by getting them into the enemy's area. We're overloading the system's already strained economy, and we're making life next to intolerable for the whites in the border areas. Even after the evacuees have been dispersed around the country, they will constitute about a 25% increase in the average non-white population density outside California. Even the most brainwashed white liberals should find this increased dose of brotherhood hard to swallow. On my way to the unit meeting about an hour ago, I stopped at an overlook above the main evacuation route out of Los Angeles. It was after sunset, but still light enough to see well, and I was awed by the sight of the enormous stream of colored life moving slowly to the east. As far as I could see in either direction, the unwholesome flood crept along. Later, we'll switch on the street lamps along the freeway, and the march will go on all night. Then in the heat of the morning, the evacuation of the able-bodied ones will be reined in enough so that we will have room on the freeway for our vehicles to get through again. We found out at the beginning that when we tried keeping the marchers going during the day, they dropped like flies. The sight of that huge flowing swarm of non-whites left me with an overwhelming feeling of relief that it was moving away from us, out of our area, and I shuddered with revulsion at the thought of being at the other end of the evacuation route and seeing that swarm moving toward me into my area. If the system bosses had the option, they'd turn the niggers back at the border with machine guns. But with the border manned with mostly non-white troops, it is pretty hard to give the order to fire on that non-white flood. Since the inundation began, they haven't been able to figure out a way to stop it. They are trapped by their own propaganda line, which maintains that each of those creatures is an equal, with equal dignity, and so forth, and must be treated accordingly. Yes, sir, things are looking up here, and I'm sure they're looking blacker and blacker elsewhere. The proof of that is in the counterflow of white refugees into our area from the east. From 100 or so a day 10 days ago, their numbers have grown to several thousands a day. Our border guards have processed a total of more than 25,000 whites coming across the line up to this afternoon. Most of these, it seems, are simply running to get away from the black troops and the black and Chicano evacuees who have flooded the enemy's border areas. If it is easier for them to run west than east, they run west. But about 10% of them are not from the border areas at all. They are white volunteers who have deliberately crossed over to join our fight. Some have come from as far as the East Coast. Whole families, as well as young men, who made their decision as soon as it became apparent to the country that our revolution has indeed established a foothold here. July 24. Boy, I'm really becoming a jack of all trades. I just got back from HQ from a repair trip to the big switching station outside Santa Barbara. It's been acting up, knocking out our electrical power here every day or so, and I had to figure out what was wrong and get a repair crew to fix it. I'll certainly be glad when we get the civilian population here organized so that the people who are supposed to keep the utilities running are back on the job again. But we must do first things first, and that means reestablishing public order and ensuring an adequate food supply. We still don't have order, but we're now bringing almost enough food into the metropolitan area to keep the people from starving. I got some insight into how we're managing that during the Santa Barbara trip. In the countryside, I passed literally hundreds of organized groups of white youngsters, some working in the orchards and fruit groves, others marching along the road singing, with fruit baskets slung across their shoulders. They all looked tanned and happy and healthy. Quite a difference from the hunger and the rioting in the cities. I had my driver stop as we came abreast of a group of about 20 young girls, all wearing heavy work gloves and miscellaneously dressed in shorts and overalls. Their leader was a freckled 15-year-old with pigtails who happily identified her group as the 128th Los Angeles Food Brigade. They had just finished 5 hours of fruit picking and were headed for lunch at their tent camp down the road. Well, I thought to myself, this is hardly a brigade, but obviously a lot more organizing of our civilian population has been going on than I've been aware of. I knew the girl was too young to be a member of the organization, and it soon developed she was totally innocent of any political understanding whatsoever. All she knew was that things back in the city are frightening and unpleasant, and so when the nice lady with the armband at the emergency food distribution center had talked to her and her parents and told them that youngsters who volunteered for farm work would be looked after and well fed, they had agreed she should go. That was a week ago, and yesterday she had been appointed the leader of her group of girls. I asked her what she thinks about her work. She said it is hard, but she knows it is important for her and her girls to pick as much fruit as possible, so their parents and friends back in the city will be able to eat. The adults at the camp have explained to them what an important responsibility they have. Had they also been told about the significance of the revolution? No, she doesn't know anything about that. Just that the Chicano farm workers have left and now the white people will have to do all their work. She thinks that is probably a good idea. Other than that, all that the girls have been taught is how to do their particular job, and the work songs and the hygiene lectures in the evenings around the campfire. Well, that's not a bad beginning for 12 to 15-year-olds. There will be time for their further education later. If only the adults were as cooperative as the kids. The girls did have one complaint, their food. There was plenty of it, but it was all fruits and vegetables. No meat, no milk, not even any bread. Obviously, the people who are organizing the food brigades have a few logistic problems yet to work out too. We swapped the girls half a case of canned sardines and some boxes of soda crackers we had in the car in return for a basket of apples, and both sides felt they had gotten a good deal. Coming through the mountains just north of Los Angeles, we encountered a long column of marchers, heavily guarded by GIs and organization personnel. As we drove slowly past, I observed the prisoners closely, trying to decide what they were. They didn't seem to be blacks or Chicanos, and yet only a few of them appeared to be whites. Many of the faces were distinctly Jewish, while others had features of hair suggesting a negroid taint. The head of the column turned off the main roadway into a little used ranger trail, which disappeared into a boulder-strewn canyon, while the trail stretched for several miles back towards the city. There may have been as many as 50,000 marchers, representing all ages and both sexes, just in the portion of the column we passed. Back at HQ, I inquired about the strange column. No one was sure, although the consensus was that they were the Jews and mixed breeds of too light a hue to be included with the evacuees who were sent east. I remember now something which puzzled me a few days ago. The separation of the very light blacks and almost whites, the octoroons and quadroons, the unclassifiable mongrels from various Asian and southern climes, from the others during the concentration and evacuation operations. And I think I now understand. The clearly distinguishable non-whites are the ones we want to increase the racial pressure on the whites outside California. The presence of more almost white mongrels would merely confuse the issue, and there is always the danger that they will later pass as white. Better to deal with them now as soon as we get our hands on them. I have a suspicion their trip into the canyon north of here will be a one-way affair. But obviously, there's still a lot of sifting out to do. We have cleared the all-black and all Chicano areas and certain all-Jewish neighborhoods. But there are still areas comprising nearly half the urban territory under our control where utter chaos prevails. Jews in these areas, working with reactionary elements among the whites, are becoming more brazen by the day. There is nearly continuous demonstrating and rioting going on in the worst sections, and the Jews are using leaflets and other means to maintain the general unrest in other sections. Since Friday, 4 of our people have been killed by snipers. Something must be done soon. July 25. A very pleasant contrast today. With most of my work of late, I spent the day interviewing some of the volunteers who have crossed into our area since July 4. Trying to pick 100 or so for a special problem-solving group, which will begin doing in a regular and systematic way the sort of engineering and logistics chores I and my crew have been stuck with till now. The people I talked to had been pre-screened before they got to me, and they all have an engineering or industrial management background. There are about 300 men, plus 100 or so wives and children, which is an indication of the really substantial flow of new blood into our area. I don't know what the total is up to now, but I do know that the organization has increased its strength in California several times over in the last 3 weeks, and we are taking as members only a small fraction of the new volunteers. The great majority have either been organized into labor brigades, primarily for farm work, or in the case of most of the males of military age, put into army uniforms and given rifles we've salvaged from one of the bombed-out National Guard armories. In the latter way, we are gradually increasing the overall reliability, if not proficiency, of the military force under our control. Many of these instant soldiers have had little or no military training, and we haven't had a chance yet to give them any of the ideological preparation which the new organization members are receiving. Yet they are clearly more sympathetic to our cause on the average than the regular GIs. We are integrating them into the regular units as rapidly as we can. I queried the people I saw today about their present living arrangements, the family situations, as well as about their training and work experience. Nearly all of them have been assigned to a block of recently vacated housing in a former black area just south of Los Angeles proper. The organization has set up a new unit HQ in a small apartment building there, and that's where the interviews took place. There were very few complaints from the people I talked to, although they all mentioned the extraordinarily filthy condition of the buildings into which they had moved. Some of the apartment units are so saturated with filth that they are simply not habitable. Everyone, however, has pitched in cheerfully, and the disinfecting, scrubbing, and repainting effort has made a remarkable transformation in just a couple of days. I made a brief inspection tour, and it was heartwarming to see pretty white children playing quietly where previously hordes of screaming young blacks had swarmed. A group of about 24 parents were still working on the grounds around the apartments. They have collected a small mountain of litter, beer cans, cigarette wrappers, empty TV dinner cartons, demolished furniture, and rusted out appliances. 2 women have marked off a sizable area of barren, thoroughly trampled lawn with stakes and string and are spading up the earth for a community vegetable garden. In windows which had previously known only torn paper shades, bright curtains, improvised from bed sheets and home dyed, I imagine, have gone up. Fresh flowers are on sills formerly occupied only by empty liquor bottles. Most of these people arrived here with little more than the clothes on their backs, having left everything behind and risked their lives in order to be with us. It's a shame we are unable to do more for them now, but they're the type who are pretty well able to do for themselves. One of the first volunteers I picked this morning was a man to find a suitable truck somewhere and use it regularly for hauling refuse away from the new settlement and bring in food each day from the nearest distribution point, which is about 6 miles away. He will be responsible for his own mechanical maintenance and for finding gasoline wherever he can, until we have time to set up a new fuel distribution system. He is a 60-year-old who formerly owned his own plastics factory in Indiana, but he is happy to be a garbage man here. By the time we get the overall civilian situation whipped into shape, the average population density in our part of California will be a little less than half what it was a month ago. There will be the greatest plenty of housing for new people coming in, and we'll probably level about half the residential and commercial areas in Los Angeles County, plant trees and make parkland of them. That lies in the future, though, and for now our aim is simply to settle the new people temporarily in areas well separated from those we haven't pacified and weeded yet. But even the tiny beginning we have already made fills me with joy and pride. What a miracle it is to walk streets which only a few weeks ago were filled with non-whites lounging at every street corner and every doorway, and to see only white faces, clean, happy, enthusiastic white faces, determined and hopeful for the future. No sacrifice is too great to successfully complete our revolution and secure that future for them, and for the girls of the 128th Los Angeles Food Brigade, and for millions of others like them throughout our land. And that was chapter 22. Come back tonight for the breakdown of chapter 22 and swing by tomorrow morning where I'll read chapter 23. I'll check you YouTubers out later.